I knew it would happen eventually, and yesterday was the day. Time got away from me, and I fell asleep really early, and I didn't get to read with you, and I am so sorry. But that means today we get 4 chapters, so we better get started, right? We are on chapter 5. Haha. Oh, no, no, shouted Annie. She raced down the bank until she reached a sandy, clear spot. Here, here, she called. The wildebeest followed her with their wild eyes. Jack watched in disbelief as the swimmers changed course. Slowly, as the wildebeest swam to where Annie stood, she waved them in like a traffic policeman. Jack grabbed his backpack. Annie, he cried, let's go before we get trampled. Keep it up, she shouted to the wildebeest as she took off after Jack. They ran farther up the river, always away from the incoming wildebeests. Finally, they stopped to catch their breath. They looked back. Everything seemed fine. The wildebeests were scrambling safely over the riverbank. Soon they would graze on the grass prepared by the zebras. Good work, Jack said to Annie. Thanks, she said. Okay, now for the riddle. No, first we've got to get clean, said Jack. You look like you're in a mud suit. High-pitched laughter rang through the air. It sounded mocking and mean. Jack and Annie turned around. They saw 2 spouted brown animals standing in the tall grass. The creatures had bodies like dogs, but had sloping backs. They laughed again. Ha ha, said Annie. You don't look so great yourself. What are they? Said Jack. He took out his book. He tried not to get mud on it as he looked for a picture. When he found it, he read aloud. On the African plains, the hyena is the ruling predator after the lion. It makes a sound similar to a high-pitched human laugh. What's a predator mean? Said Annie, or asked Annie. It means it catches things and eats them, said Jack. Oh, said Annie. Yuck. The 2 hyenas laughed again, and they moved closer to Jack and Annie. Quietly, Jack read more. The hyena has a reputation for being a thief and a coward. Let's see if they're cowards, whispered Annie. Let's try to scare them. The hyenas laughed and moved a little closer. How? Jack asked her. Act like a monster, said Annie. Now! Jack and Annie made terrible monster faces. They put out their hands and rushed at the hyenas. Arrgh! They shouted. The hyenas yelped and scurried off. Scaredy cats, Annie shouted after them. Come on, said Jack. Annie and Jack took off in the other direction. They ran around a bend in the river. Jack had heard the hyena laughter again. It sounded far away. Good, he said. They're gone. Hey, maybe we can wash over there, said Annie. She pointed to the edge of the forest. There was a small pond surrounded by tall grass. Zebras were drinking the water. Yeah, said Jack, if it's safe enough for them to drink. The zebras ignored them as they walked toward the pond. And then the hyenas. When they reached the edge of the water, Jack set his heavy pack down in the dry grass. He glanced around. No lions in sight, but then he heard something. On the far side of the pond, something very big was coming out of the trees. Chapter 6. Spick and span. Be still, said Jack. Jack and Annie stood frozen as the elephant stepped out of the shadows. It waded into the pond and dipped its trunk into the water. Oh, wow, said Annie. Jack breathed a sigh of relief. An elephant wasn't going to chase them and eat them. Still, the elephant was huge. Let's sneak away, said Jack. But I want to watch, said Annie. Fine, said Jack. He was tired of Annie getting sidetracked. I'm going to solve the riddle by myself. I'll meet you back at the treehouse. He turned to go. A spray of water rained down over him. It came from behind. He shouted with surprise and looked back. The elephant's trunk was pointed straight at Annie. Cool, she cried. He's giving me a shower. The elephant sprayed her again, then again. The mud slowly rolled off her face, her braids, her t-shirt, her shorts, her legs, and her sneakers. I guess the elephant doesn't like dirty kids, said Annie, laughing. Her eyes were squeezed shut. Finally, she was clean and soaking wet. Now it's your turn, she said to Jack. Jack stepped forward and shut his eyes tight. A blast of water hit him. It did feel like a shower, a strong shower. When Jack was clean, the elephant let out a grunt. Then he started to splash himself with water. Thanks, said Annie. Yeah, thanks, said Jack. I'm spick and span now, said Annie. When the sun dries me off, I'll be like new. Good, said Jack. Now we can get serious. He picked up his heavy pack. We have to figure out the answer to the riddle so we can leave this place before we run into trouble. He looked around nervously. Where are the lions? He wondered. A small bird flittered near his head. Hi, said Annie to the bird. Jack turned back to her. According to the riddle, we're looking for something gold and sweet. What do you want? Annie asked the bird. The bird twittered and flew around Jack and Annie. Its feathers were a dull gray, but it had a bright, happy manner. Annie, listen to me, not the bird, said Jack. The bird kept fluttering around them. She's trying to tell us something, said Annie. Jack let out a long sigh. You're driving me crazy today, he said. But I feel like she needs our help, said Annie. Maybe her babies fell out of a nest. Annie, you can't save every animal in the Africa, said Jack. This bird is important, said Annie. Trust me. The bird darted towards the trees. It landed on a branch and crooked its head at them. She says, follow, said Annie. The bird headed into the forest. Annie started after it. Don't go in there, said Jack. You might run into. There was no need to finish. The bird and Annie had disappeared into the trees. A snake or a lion, Jack said to himself. Come on, Annie called. Jack moaned. He pulled on his pack and ran. The peanut butter jar thumped against his back. Chapter 7. Hi there. The forest was cooler than the sunny plains. It was filled with shadows and birds' calls. Where are you? Jack shouted. Here, said Annie. He found her in the thick glade. Bright rays streamed between the trees. Green leaves and vines swayed in the dappled light. The light gray bird sat in a tree, twittering at them. Yuck, what's that? Said Annie. She pointed at a round thing hanging from a low branch. Bees buzzing around it. If that's her nest, it's a pretty weird nest, said Annie. That's not a nest, said Jack. It's a beehive. Don't you see the bees? Yikes, said Annie. She stepped back from the tree, but the little bird darted at the beehive and peeked at it. What's she doing? Said Annie. The bird kept peeking at the hive. I don't know. Maybe she's as nuts as you, said Jack. Look her up in the book, said Annie. See if it says she's nuts. Are you kidding? Said Jack. That nutty bird isn't going to be in this book. Just look. Jack opened his Africa book. He kept turning the pages. Just as he thought, there was no gray bird in the book. Forget it, he said. Keep looking, said Annie. Jack turned one more page, and there it was, a little gray bird, a beehive, and a tall, painted warrior with a spear. I don't believe this, said Jack. Then he read aloud. This bird is called a honey guide. It's both a friend and a helper to the Maasai people, an African tribe known for their fierce fighting and skills and bravery. Hi, honey guide, Annie called to the bird. I knew you were important. Jack kept reading. The honey guide leads the Maasai tribe person to a beehive. The bird waits for him and her to scatter the bees and take the honey. Then the bird feasts on the honeycomb. That's cool, said Jack. They work together like the zebras and the wildebeests and the gazelles. Yeah, said Annie. And she wants us to be her helpers. We have to scatter the bees and leave her the honeycomb. How do we do that? Said Jack. He looked back at the book. It doesn't say how. Well, maybe we could wave those weeds at them, said Annie. She pointed at some bright green plants that looked like giant fans. Oh, leaves, not weeds. Just want to make sure I got it right. No, it says weeds. But I don't know. I don't think they're weeds. I think they're leaves. But we'll see, said Annie. She pointed at some of the bright green plants that looked like giant fans. Jack put his book and backpack down. He and Annie pulled up the weeds. They waved them near the trees, and the bees scattered. Next, Jack grabbed the tree branch and giggled. The beehive fell to the ground and broke then open. Annie stopped and stuck her fingers into the golden honeycomb. Yummy, she said when she tasted the honey. Try it. Jack stuck his finger in the honeycomb. Phew. He licked off the golden honey. It was the sweetest honey he had ever tasted. Now the honey guide can get to her honeycomb, said Annie. Yeah, but she'd better be hungry before the bees come back, said Jack. It's weird, said Annie. Honey is so sweet and good, but to get it, you have to go past a lot of dangerous bees. Oh man, whispered Jack. That's it. What's what? That's what? Asked Annie. Jack said Morgan's riddle. It's the color of gold and as sweet as can be, but beware of the danger that's all around me. What am I? I get it, Annie whispered. Honey. Honey, said Jack, nodding and smiling. That's it. We've answered Morgan's riddle. Let's go home. He stood up to leave. He gasped. Standing in the shadows was a tall man with a spear and a curved sword hanging from his belt. His face was painted in a fierce, bright colors. Jack knew at once what he was, a Messiah warrior. Hi there, Annie said in a small voice. Chapter 8. Yum. Well, that's a good sign. The warrior stared back at Jack and Annie. We were helping one of your honey guides, said Annie. The warrior was as still as a statue. We didn't mean to steal anything, Jack said. In fact, it's all yours. We've had enough. Lots of good honey still there, Annie said, smiling. The warrior narrowed his eyes. Is he angry? Jack wondered. I'm sorry we were trespassing, said Jack. We come in peace. In fact, we bring gifts. He picked up his pack and held out to the warrior. The warrior still didn't move. This, Jack held up his book. Nothing. Jack reached into his pack. He pulled out the big jar of peanut butter. Peanut butter! He pulled out the loaf of bread. Bread. Hey, hey. How about the peanut butter and honey sandwich? Yum, Annie said, watching the warrior. The warrior stared at the food. We'll show you, said Jack. As Jack unwrapped the bread, his hands shook. He was nervous. Annie opened the jar. We don't have anything to spread it with. Use your fingers, said Jack. Excuse me, Annie said to the warrior. I have to use my fingers, but they're pretty clean. An elephant just do it, Annie, said Jack. Okay. She spread the peanut butter onto a slice of bread with her fingers. At the same time, Jack spread the honey from the beehive on the other side. Jack and Annie put their pieces of bread together. Ta-da, said Annie, handing the sandwich over to the warrior. The warrior took the sandwich. But he didn't eat it. He just looked at it. Let's make sandwiches for us too, Jack said, so he doesn't have to eat alone. They quickly made 2 more sandwiches. See, like this, said Annie. She bit into her sandwich. Yum. Jack took a bite too. He said. It was really good. Finally, the warrior bit into his sandwich. He chewed slowly. This is called a picnic, said Annie. They ate their sandwiches in silence. When they finished, Jack screwed the lid back on the peanut butter. Not bad, huh? He said. The warrior smiled. He had a kind, dignified smile. Jack and Annie smiled back at him. Then the warrior turned gracefully and vanished into the trees. Oh man, said Jack. Part of him wanted to follow this silent warrior through the shadowed forest. Ready? Annie asked softly. Jack nodded. Annie started to go. Wait, said Jack. He put away the peanut butter and bread. We're going back to the treehouse, right? We're not going to do anything silly like rescue anything or chase birds, right? Those things aren't silly, said Annie. Don't forget that bird gave us the answer to the riddle. All right, said Jack. He looked at the little honey guide. She was on the ground pecking at the honeycomb. Thanks, Jack said to the bird. Have a good feast, said Annie. Jack put on his pack. Then he and Annie started out of the forest. When they passed the pond, they saw the elephant was still splashing in the water. He lifted his trunk. He seemed to be waving at them. See ya, Annie shouted, waving back. They rounded the bend in the river, then started through the tall grass. As they walked back toward the treehouse, they saw the wildebeest in the distance. There were still some crossing the river. They saw a family of zebras grazing together. They saw a lone giraffe walking from tree to tree eating the leaves. And they saw a bunch of lions sleeping in the shade of the tree, the same tree that the treehouse was in. Whoops, said Annie. Jack's heart gave a jump. So there they are, he said. He's been looking for him the whole time. So we will find out what happens with Jack, Annie, and the lions in the next chapter tomorrow. I promise. I will not miss another day, hopefully, fingers crossed. But remember, as I've told you many times in my class, I am a weird human thing, and sometimes I make mistakes. So I'm sorry that this is an extra long video, but hey, we did get 4 chapters in, and we will continue and finish our book tomorrow. Oh, but I have to reveal, I did not get the riddle this time. I thought it might be a papaya, but I didn't think they were in Africa. I was a little confused by that one. I couldn't get it. But I also didn't think about bees, because I normally think about those in America stinging me. So that one just got me. I couldn't get that one. Did you? I don't know. I wish you luck on the next one. But I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.